Voces Latinos, 1610 AM. A drink of water with Joyce Aldrich. Refresh your mind.
Welcome to this edition of A Drink of Water. Anyway, it is -2 at 8 o'clock, so we're having some nice cold winter weather and some snow coming this weekend. And in the studio this evening, I have Victor Viggiani. He's the news director of Zealand Communications, and that's an international news service, and experience involves UFO sightings, and he reports those investigations as academic and radio journalism with a primary focus on UFO and ET government disclosure. We're going to be talking a bit about that this evening, but first I'm going to play Brian May's song, New Horizons, because we are going into space exploration now and some exciting times coming up. So here it is, Brian May.
11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff of NASA's New Horizons space program.
The revelations of New Horizons may help us to understand better how our solar system was formed.
New Horizons, that's by Brian May, and that's a guitarist, musician, member of Queen, and he is also an astrophysicist. Wow. But in studio we have Victor Viggiani with us this evening. So nice to have you in studio, Victor. Nice to have you around. And we've known each other for quite a few years, actually. Yeah, going back over 30 years, the same time that you've really been exploring all of this.
That's right. It's quite the history we have.
Yeah, we sort of all stepped out too. And you talk about New Horizons, and there's this NASA, spacecraft going out, and it's now in the Kuiper Belt. It's taking pictures of Ultima Thule, the oldest specimen of, that we have ever seen or explored. And, you have NASA saying, there is no way that we could possibly hide any alien encounters or any alien presence. Of course, when I read that article, I thought, wow, you mean they're going to disclose or something? But that's not what they were saying. They were saying really that there's no way. We had gathered so much information and we're so transparent. There's no way we could possibly be hiding anything. Nothing to see here. So, I thought I'd open it up with that because we wanted to sort of talk about NASA then and now.
Well, the whole thing that's a good point that you make. NASA then and NASA now. Mm-hmm. If you want to talk just for a moment about NASA then, we're talking years ago, and we're talking the space program that began the whole journey towards the moon.
And it had a lot of integrity because it had the guys from the Second World War, those fighter pilots, those guys who went out into the, made out take all those risks for us.
Yeah, that's the key point about what we're looking at here, is that all of those people that went out into space back with the when the programs began, Gemini, and the Apollo missions, we're looking at information from 12 separate astronauts, and if people want to really find out what these men really saw and what they did, they really do need to go and look at the historical testimony of these individuals. We're talking pilots, war pilots, World War II pilots, well trained in their craft, not only as pilots but as astronauts. So we're looking at people like Gordon Cooper, Scott Carpenter, James Lovell. Making statements, making very, very direct statements, Joyce, about what they experienced both on the moon itself and on their way to and from the moon. And the most incisive quote that I could use to give your listeners some sort of indication or insight as to what these things were doing is Scott Carpenter. And Scott Carpenter said at one point, he said, at no time were any of the Gemini or Apollo missions not under the surveillance of some kind of extraterrestrial craft. And that's just a very brief statement from him. And what can you say about that? You can look at it in two ways. Well, he's just shooting his mouth off, and pilots don't do that.
No.
Pilots do not do that.
They lose their jobs.
Exactly. So that one aspect, that one comment by him is bolstered by comments by Marie Chatelain. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with him. He's a former NASA Communication Systems director, and he was quite clear that James Lovell and a number of the astronauts were very clear in what they saw, both on their way to and from the moon, and when they were on the other side of the moon. So you can discount that information in one way. People who are critical or cynical about this whole issue could develop some sort of explanatory scenario as to bring these kinds of comments in doubt. And that's only out of their own desperation, Joyce. These men made these kinds of statements on and over again. And when you get the first man on the moon to step foot on the moon, Neil Armstrong, saying that they're right on the horizon, and using the medical channel to communicate back to Earth and indicate to them that these things are here. There's not a whole lot of room for discussion on that one. So that's the NASA then, I would really kind of suggest that your listeners do look at that kind of testimony, and also the testimony of Cooper, of Bill Cooper. That's very well documented.
And he went out. He talked to people.
That's right. He testified. He testified in front of a UN committee.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. So for years and years, he said, "I've kept a secret about this whole thing, and now it's time to speak about it." So that kind of testimony is very difficult to deal with in the real world. And if anyone does want to check it out, just for their own information to begin with, and then if they want to, tell their friends, write about it, communicate with media about it, this is a fine place to start, because these men are the absolute, ultimate integrity, and there's no reason to doubt anything that these men have said.
Exactly. And I'm thinking too, we just come out of a vile Second World War, and then First World War before that, and we had an invading enemy, someone who's going to take over Hitler could have done that, but to have to go to the moon and to be able to say that there's another unknown presence, an alien presence, we don't know what it is, we have no idea what they're going to do, and to tell the people of the world after they're just recovering from 2 world wars and the Korean War and the Vietnam War and all the stuff. Maybe that's why there was no disclosure. I don't know. I'm just thinking about that right now. But I'm thinking about the Chinese now on the dark side of the moon, and they're sending back pictures. So can we trust the Chinese if they find anything over there? Because we didn't go back to the moon because there were bases. Is that a baseless comment I'm making? Does that have any teeth?
Some of the argument is we were told not to go back. That's part of the testimony of some of the astronauts and some of the people, sort of the conspiratorial, the world of the UFO reality. I don't know about that. I can't say for sure, but the fact of the matter is that China has set down on the other side of the moon. And
taking pictures.
Sure, and if Carl Wolf is anyone to believe, gave testimony that he saw pictures of Quonset huts, tall towers, hundreds and hundreds of feet tall on the other side of the moon bases. If he's to be believed, and he saw these pictures, and he was also told that, well, we get rid of these pictures, we airbrush them out so that no one really sees them, there's another piece of testimony there. So there's enough testimony about the moon itself to begin anyone wondering about what's really going on there. And it's absolutely essential that we take these people seriously. Whether we believe them or not is another question. We need to look at their evidence, we need to look at their testimony, and it just compiles itself. It's like waves hitting a shore on and on relentlessly. And when those waves, you can't ignore waves that hit the shore for thousands and thousands of years.
There's a reason for them. What causes those waves?
That's right. So there's something pushing this whole thing forward. And if you take a look at any beach on any continent, those waves have been hitting the shore for thousands and thousands of years. And so has the UFO ET reality been hitting the minds and the essence of us as a human species, as a human family for thousands of years. This is not something recent. No. This has been going on for a long, long time.
It's biblical.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot to deal with here.
And you know that the Chinese are going to be digging down. They say about 3 meters into the moon. So maybe that'll negate any idea that there's a hollow moon. This ping that people say they've heard.
Yeah.
There's so many. You gotta sort of separate the wheat from the chaff and try to figure out what is going on exactly. Yeah. So that's why you're here tonight. We're gonna figure it all out tonight. That's it.
We'll provide all the answers.
We're gonna solve
we're
gonna solve this mystery. But we're gonna go to break at 8:15, and when we come back, we'll have more Victor Viggiani, and he is the news director of Zealand Communications. That's an international news service, and doing some great work, getting some information out there, and making some good contacts with media, which we will talk about right after the break.
You are listening to Radio Voces Latinas, 1610 AM. A drink of water.
Might be Venus or some unknown light, hovering a bit too low tonight. The lightning sheet, lightning with a balloon, or something strange out of a fireside cartoon. What was that I saw tonight? Well, I was looking for a satellite. It was bright as a star, blue red lights blinking. UFO, oh no! What could I be thinking? Then a beam of light, bright as a halogen, scanned my body again and again. A message said to get myself ready for changes that would make the world unsteady. Live in the now, be aware they cried, and let compassion be your guide. Is that all I said? And they replied, get inside and we'll take you for a ride. We time travel to a time on Earth with no war, hunger, or strife. This, they said, could be Earth's new life. But only if we do the simple things like living in the now and compassion. Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. Might be Venus or some unknown light, hovering a bit too low tonight. The lightning sheet, lightning with a balloon, or something strange out of a fireside cartoon.
Yeah, you're listening to A Drink of Water, and that was Starlight. And that was Victor, that was the theme song for my program, Interstellar, the UFO show, that I had on Rogers for 4 years. And of course, you know, our dear friend and loved one, Errol Bruce Knapp, who had Strange Days Indeed and Mind Shift on CFRB for several years, and who passed away just a couple of years ago. And then you, of course, can be heard on Sundays from 11 p.m. to 1 in the morning on the Richard Surratt's show on Talk, 740.
That's right. Yeah, Zoomer Radio.
Zoomer Radio, AM 740. Yeah. So, and of course, I have you on every so often. I do talk about these, because it's a very important topic. It's not just, let's entertain people with some UFO stories and stuff. It's not that at all. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a contactee. I happen to, when you actually see this and experience it, that's another thing. And to be able to talk about that and not have the laughter curtain ring down, that's really important. And we need to have the media involved. So there is no more laughter curtain.
Well, that laughter curtain is, I think, Stanton Friedman called the giggle factor. There's a lot of people who coin those kinds of phrases about how people respond to this whole thing. Yeah. And especially the media. You touched on a point of how important this issue is. And over the years, at several conferences that I've spoken at, in Washington, D.C., in Rochester, New York, in Brisbane, Australia, Melbourne, done a number of presentations, and
including the National Press Club,
that's right,
on CBC, CTV.
Exactly.
It's like you've been on mainstream media.
That's right, and they're starting to get the hint, and they often ask me, on the interviews that I do and other radio programs too, Victor, why is this so important? Yeah. And this is just my own particular opinion, but I think there's a consensus out there among most of the people who are deeply involved in this issue, and there are a cadre of people. We're talking hundreds, possibly thousands of UFO researchers out there globally in the exopolitics community and the UFO research community. I could rhyme the names off, and I would start now and finish tomorrow morning. These people are right into this stuff, and I'd like to get their message out. But the one thing that I do like to frame this issue with is the statement that this is the next step in our evolution as a species. This is where we're going. We have to leave our childhood behind. We have to become no longer teenagers or young adults. We have to become adult about this whole thing and understand that everything that we've talked about, and this thing has tentacles all over the place, between contactees, zero-point energy, interdimensional travel. We don't know a whole lot about what's going on.
Michio Kaku has talked about this in his novel I read, Hyperspace. He talks about this, about how we're evolving as a people and how it needs to evolve and how we become a different kind of human being. We're doing that again. Yeah,
and that's important to recognize. That's the core of the issue. There's all the other belief structures or independent pieces of information that you either believe or don't believe, or that you can criticize or accept. But no one can really deal with or criticize the fact that whatever is going on, and I'm the first to say I don't know exactly what's going on.
I don't either. Yeah. I don't either. I saw things.
Yeah, and anyone who says they know all about this stuff, yes, I've met the aliens and they're among my best friends. Well, yeah.
We don't know that.
We don't know anything for sure.
Dr. Jacobs doesn't think so.
And once we do find out what's really going on, I'm convinced, Joyce, that it's going to be completely different than anything that we expect. And I'll say that with a caveat. And the caveat will be the only people that I can really depend on to come forward to not tell the truth, but at least express their testimony in honest and authentic,
I'm going to say honest and
authentic terms.
Authentic,
are the contactees.
Yeah.
When people say, well, has contact been made? My first response is yes, contact has been made.
Absolutely, it has been.
The contactees are, and I've talked to these people. I've interviewed them. I've counseled them.
Yeah.
And these people, first of all, they move from fear to knowledge. And in my discussions with Dr. John Mack, I visited his office twice in Cambridge University offices, and he told me that the so-called victims move from fear to calmness or knowledge, and there's this transition. And once
That's
they reach,
very true.
it is, it is. They no longer become victims.
I've gone through that.
Yeah. And once you understand that they're talking from a position of authenticity, every single word, every single idea, the way they ideate about things, you can count on it. You can take it to the bank as being authentic. So
that's interesting. You talked about ideation and how we ideate, because there's a certain way when you know someone's telling the truth about something that they will express it in whatever genre, whatever it is, whatever area it is. If you're talking to a scientist or a plumber or whatever, but when you talk to a contactee, it's true, and it's not that we're reading each other's, contact experiences or a lot of books and things like that, because there's something else that comes through that Dr. John Mack saw. And and I'll tell you, it changes your life. There's no way you can live normally.
Yeah. It's like a fingerprint.
It is.
Each person, it goes through this, and I've interviewed and spoken to and counseled, or whatever you want to call it, enough individuals to realize that no one experience is exactly the same. There's a strain of experiences that are similar. But when you take a look at the nitty-gritty of what they go through, it's like a fingerprint, and you have to listen very carefully to what they say. Every single idea, every single nuance, every single closed eyes when they talk. When someone speaks to you with closed eyes, if they're thinking, or when they look directly into your own, you have to pay very close attention to what they're saying. And this gives you the sense that these people have been through something very, very real. And I keep on using that word authentic because that's what it's all about, authenticity.
It is. And it does, not just a fingerprint, but it's almost like it changes DNA. Not that our actual DNA is changed, but, you know, how you can change your brain chemistry and everything, you know, but, well, it changes your brain chemistry. I really believe that.
Yeah. Well, it's a function of this whole idea. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work of Rebecca Hardcastle.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, she has sent me just her recent book on extra consciousness, and this is something that I think is going to be another strain of information that the public will eventually become to understand. It seems to be on the fringe right now because people really aren't there just yet. In general, I'm talking.
Right.
But once the whole idea of exo consciousness, or just this collective consciousness, comes to the horizon, comes to the forefront.
Very Jungian.
Yeah, that's right.
Very Jungian.
Yeah, it's been an idea, this whole idea of entanglement, that every single particle of matter in the universe is in one way or another connected. This is all related to the UFO ET phenomenon.
Absolutely, because we don't know if they're solid or if they're multidimensional, because they sure seem to shapeshift. They seem to go in and out. They're fast, they're slow, they stop, they go, you know.
Yeah, it's just a different way of knowing, and that in and of itself was enough to create a lot of confusion in many people's minds, especially people who are novices in attempting to understand it, because the information comes at you, like I said earlier, in waves. And the tsunami that hits some of the minds that are out there, it's difficult for them to consume all of that, and you really have to take it apart very gradually and understand it at all the different nuanced levels of what's really going on. These are not just gross craft that are showing up and taking water from lakes and abducting people. There's much more to this.
It's not just about cattle mutilations or ovum being taken and people being inseminated and blah blah blah. Right. And people think, well, that's all it is. It sure isn't. You're told things. You're told things about who you are and what you're supposed to do. And you think about that and you go, do I tell anyone that stuff?
Yeah, it's a journey into self-discovery.
I think it's meant to be on some level, but who knows who they are. We're going to go to break again because we go out at 8:28. We'll be back in a couple of minutes after with more of Victor Viggiani and a very, important conversation, because listen very carefully to what's being said this evening, because you may have had an experience yourself. You may know somebody. Dollars to donuts. You start talking about this in any kind of company. Someone's going to say something. Just that one person, and they'll go, "Oh, and they talk. Okay, so we're going to go out. It's 8:28. We'll be back right after this.
You are listening to Radio Voces Latinas, 1610 AM. A drink of water.
I've got everything I need. I'm the urban spaceman, baby, I can fly. I'm a supersonic guy. I don't need pleasure, I don't feel pain. If you were to knock me down, I'd just get up again. I'm the urban spaceman, baby, I'm making out. I'm all about. I wake up every morning with a smile upon my face. My natural exuberance spills out all over the place. I'm the urban spaceman, I'm intelligent and clean. Know what I mean? I'm the urban spaceman.
Spaceman. That's Bonzo Dog Band. Something from the past, but definitely current, because as he says, I'm the urban spaceman and I don't exist. And that's what the media's been trying to tell us all along, Victor. That it doesn't, it's just funny and it's entertaining. So tell me a little bit about how the media can be involved and how they are being involved, and is there a change? I think I've noticed a change in the mainstream media in the reports, like front page, and not laughing about it.
Definitely, yeah.
They're not laughing anymore.
Let's just for a second go back to 2013, and we'll take you forward from there. In 2013, Stephen Bassett held the citizen hearings on disclosure in Washington, D.C. at the Washington National Press Club. Had 400 or 500 people a day for over a week from Monday to the Friday. I attended every single day and took notes and participated in the entire conference. And he had 30 witnesses giving over 40 hours of testimony. And I believe it was on, I think it was the last day of April, because April ended in the middle of the week. I think it was the 29th or 30th. I think it was the 30th of April.
Yeah.
I finished that day. I think it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And I finished the day, and my cell phone rings. And I'm leaving the press club, and there's the marble stairs going down to go back to my apartment. And it's Mitch Potter from the Toronto Star. I don't know if you're familiar with Mitch Potter. At the time, he was the Washington bureau chief of the Toronto Star.
Okay.
Situated in Washington, D.C. And he says, Victor Viggiani, yes, I am. I want to know more about this witness hearing. So I sit down on the steps as everybody's leaving, passing me by, and he starts pummeling me with questions.
Like a scene from a movie.
Oh, it was, Joyce, it was incredible.
Wow.
So I didn't know where this was going. He asked, what are you doing? Why is it happening? Who's there? Why are you doing this? Da-da-da-da. So okay, fine, he's going to do something on this. I didn't know what. This was the Tuesday morning, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Wednesday morning, I get up really early in the morning, needing to get down to the press club as soon as I could before 9 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And I get an email from a friend who has been following this. He said, Victor, you got to go to the Toronto Star. And so I went to it, and it was on the internet at the time, but apparently in print, and I've got the print copy of it. It was on the front page of the Toronto Star.
There you go.
You know, believers invade, UFO believers invade Washington, D.C. And Mitch Potter quotes me up, down, and up to the center about this.
And correctly.
And correctly.
Amazing.
Not a word of ridicule.
Wow.
Not a word of the snickering or anything like that. It was serious reporting. Good. And I took that as this is back in 2013. So we're talking, 5-6 years ago. So that in and of itself, it was sort of a benchmark in my mind, and it hit the waves, it hit the shore pretty hard, and the entire conference was affected by it because it was the first time the front page of any major newspaper had covered that. Now, and so bring us up to fast forward now, saying to myself, well, where is this going in the media today? And as you just said earlier, the media is definitely picking up on this. The New York Times has done some great work recently.
Yeah, you find articles all the time about space exploration, and it's all intertwined.
Exactly. It's all coming together.
Yeah.
And I credit Leslie Kane for her assistance with, I forget, I think it's Mark Blumenthal in the New York Times who came forward in December of 2016 with the article on the Pentagon stuff, which we can get into.
Yes,
that's another issue, but right now we'll talk about the media. For the New York Times to report on something that serious in that way, with, once again, absence of any ridicule factor at all. Completely.
And the Times can be very good at ridicule.
You bet. Yeah. As any,
but they have they got a New York state of mind.
That's right, yeah. But they went at it in the right way.
They did.
So fast forward again, I get this information over from the New York Times, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, who in Canada needs to know this? And I'm a firm believer that the media in Canada is a lot more amorphous, a lot more quote-unquote naive. They're not the big corporate entity that you see down in the States with the 3 major networks and PBS and with the multiplicity of news stations that are down there. Our broadcasting system is a little bit more simple, a little more straightforward, not as convoluted, not as controlled, for lack of a better word.
Just the facts, man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. In any case, so I'm talking about December 2016. I said, okay, some people need to know about this. So I send an email to CBC, The Current, Anna Maria Tremonti.
Yes.
And I'm sure your listeners are familiar with The Current. Yeah. Number one investigative journalist in Canada.
Yeah,
Heard
great gal.
Every single morning from 8:30, I think, till 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I emailed her and said, listen, this is something that you may want to pay attention to. The New York Times has come out with this disclosure that the U.S. Pentagon has invested $22 million directly funded by the Senate on an investigation of UFOs. Why did they do it? Senator Harry Reid did on and on. So date, time, and place, I was as factual as I possibly could be. The next day, Joyce, I get a telephone call from Josh Bloch, the producer of The Current.
Wow.
Mr. Viggiani, yes, I am. Dealing Communications, yes. What's this stuff about the Pentagon and $22 million? I said, well, are you sitting down? And that's the first thing I said. The second, are you serious? Do you really want to know? He said, yes, this is a story of interest. So I just described the whole idea behind what Leslie Kean did, what Harry Reid did, the $22 million, Luis Elizondo, the program from 2007, 2012 to investigate UFOs. Why do they spend $22 million? And by the way, he's asked for more money too now. In any case, he said, fine, thank you. Is there anybody that I could speak to about this? I said, well, I can help you out with that, but there are a few names that you might want to look up. So I gave him a couple of names. The very next day, Joyce, The Current aired a 38-minute segment in the morning from 9 o'clock until about 9:30, 5:38, interviewing Nick Pope and two other UFO experts.
Good people.
Good people.
Good people. Not there are fringe.
No, these are solid.
These are solid people.
Yeah, solid people.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so I mean, when you take a look at that kind of interview, and you can go to my website, Zealand Communications, at the blog, and you can actually read the press release that I released announcing not only what the Pentagon program was and is, but also there's an URL there where you can look at it and click on the URL, and you can hear the entire program, the Zealand Communications, and just look for The Current on there. You can listen to it. And the testimony by Nick Pope alone is enough to curl your hair, because this man knew the ins and outs of everything, and he did a great job. So what does that mean? Fine, they got the information out, which is great, but what does it really mean in a media sense? Well, it's the #1 broadcasting show in Canada program.
Well, it's our national media. Yeah,
unheard of. Now the question is again,
very conservative.
Yeah, oh, they are, and for them to go out on a limb like this, it was a big goal for them.
Yeah.
So what does it mean? It means that we're in the ballpark now. We have the ear of CBC. Whether they want to continue on recognizing this as a major issue is another question, because I've been in constant communication with them about other things that have evolved since then. The To the Stars Initiative, things about zero-point energy with Hal Puthoff. We want to get them engaged with this issue. Now, how willing they are to go forward on it is another question. And that's one of the main things that I work on. And to have that kind of initiative begun in 2018, early 2018, as far as I'm concerned, that's a huge step forward, which we all have to take advantage of. Radio programs like this, your listeners have to need more information about it. They have to want more information about it. And I just encourage them to badger the news network to say, I need more than Survivor. I need more than
the reality. This is a real reality show.
Exactly. Yeah.
UFOs are real. Stanton Friedman.
That's right. Yeah.
He's said that for years.
Yeah. So that move in the media, and not to say that's the only thing that's going on, but it's one key component in Canada that I think that if the Canadian news media does follow up on this, we could be front and center with, if not disclosure, at least a form of what I call acknowledgement, getting it out into the conversational discourse among people sitting on buses, people sitting in restaurants,
that's right,
in bars, talking about what's this UFO stuff all about. These people are covering it. We've got to take it seriously. What does it really mean? If we can begin that kind of conversation, as far as I'm concerned, that's a small d form of disclosure and acknowledgement. So that, to me, the media is beginning to pick it up, and your idea to begin with, noticing that you've noticed a change.
Oh, a big change.
Is significant.
But I've also noticed a NASA article I mentioned that said, NASA, you know, if there was anything out there, we would have spotted it. We would have told you. It's totally transparent because once the images come in, we can't do anything about it. In this digital age, everything is out there immediately. Boom, boom, boom. And that's not true.
The article that you're referring to is the astronomer, the director of communications for NASA.
Well, that would be pretty high up.
Right.
Yeah.
Her name is Michelle Thaler.
That's
T-H-A-L-L, Thaler. In any case, there's a video about that if you want to look at it.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. That kind of talk, I'll call it talk for now, is a form of obfuscation that NASA has become very good at. For them to say that we would tell you immediately.
Well, then people, it's NASA. It's like a type of brainwashing. I don't know. It's like, you know, they don't, you know.
That indicates to me, Joyce, that this individual that we're talking really doesn't know what she is talking about, because I don't think she's well informed. I don't think she's particularly lying to us. I really don't think she is. She's just not in the know.
She's got that more ABC kind of look at things. She's not looking outside the box of NASA.
That's right. And there are people who are giving her that information that, well, you know, if there's information out there, we're going to share it. That's the party line.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is that NASA knows exactly, it's one of the agencies that knows exactly what's going on. They know what's going on with the secret space program. Right now, they're putting...
Yeah, what about that space program? You know, Space Force, you know, what...
Well, that's a different thing than the secret space. The Space Force.
I know it's different. Yeah. It's more. It's the exterior one. It's like it's like our International Space Station, but there's other stuff.
That's right. It's
other stuff.
It's the facade behind the curtain.
Yeah,
is what that is. And once we realize that the United States government, in one way or another. Now, when I use the term government, I don't mean the people sitting in the elected offices. Not that we're talking about people behind the scenes, the NRO, the NSA, factions within NASA. These factions already know about anti-gravitic technology. They already know about zero-point energy. I have information, and not just me. Mark McCandlish has this, and a number of other people. They are using this at the time, right now, to put on the edges of wings to make sure these craft can go faster, this electrogravitic technology. So we're talking about a kind of energy that will allow for anti-gravitic movement of craft that don't depend on thrust and lift. At which we're not sending men at the top of firecrackers up to the moon anymore. No. I mean, that's archaic. We might as well just, you know, burn incense and hope for the best.
That's just so Marvin the Martian.
Yeah, it is just so archaic.
Or my favorite Martian.
That's right.
No, he was a little more advanced. He had a ship.
Access to light speed travel. And we're at the cusp of understanding that. So that's where this is all going in terms of the men and the women behind the curtain that kind of know what's really going on here.
So we're ready to blast off, really, into another space-time continuum. I mean, really is space the final frontier kind of thing. Oh my gosh! So we're going to go to break, and Victor, I gotta have you on again. After you're going away for a little while, you're going to be on vacation for a while. So when you get back,
definitely,
let's do this more regularly.
Sure.
Because I know you're on the Richard Surrett Show, and that's wonderful. But you know what? This is another audience again, and I'm sure they listen to your show as well. But that would be on Sundays from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Zoomer Radio 740. We're going to go to break and be right back with a little bit of Roger Ellis and Starship Enterprise, speaking of space, the final frontier, and more of Victor Viggiani.
CHHA 1610 AM.
You are listening to Radio Voces Latinas, 1610 AM. A drink of water.
best of friends, making songs about Star Trek. The kitchen table was the bridges. We played our guitars in the night and sang out loud. Ride the Starship Enterprise, man, I need my space. Ride the Starship Enterprise, what a trip with my friends and guitars on the Enterprise. That was Kirk and I was Spock. Beat me up there, Mr. Scott. Flying in our kitchen ship, I swear we could go where no man's gone before. Ride the Starship Enterprise, man, I need my space. Ride the Starship Enterprise, what a trip with my friends and guitars on the Enterprise. Miss you, my old friend. We played well together. The music and the starship burns as we played our guitars in the night and sang out loud. Like the Starship Enterprise, man, I need my space. Like the Starship Enterprise, put a trip for my friends and guitars on the Enterprise. Ride the Starship Enterprise, man, I need my space. Ride the Starship Enterprise, put a trip for my friends and guitars on the Enterprise.
Roger Ellis, former lead guitarist for Edward Bear, with his song Starship Enterprise. Most fitting for the last segment of our program, as we're going to talk about the space program. Victor Viggiani is here in studio with me, and we've been talking about not just UFO disclosures, but how important this subject is, and how it's being handled by the media, by NASA, by experiencers, by everyone. Yeah. So, Victor, space program.
What do you want to know?
Not everything. You got a whole 5 minutes. You can do it.
I should
Actually,
say
you got like 6 minutes.
Okay. No, I should say that I'm not an expert on this particular part. I know quite a bit about it, but
we're just talking about NASA. Sharing what NASA does, sharing what other people. Yeah.
The idea behind what I do is to try to gather as much information as I possibly can.
Right.
And as soon as you see some sliver of information that seems to, perk its head out, that's when I begin reporting on it through the news blog, and I do press releases.
Now, the news blog is, so people can go there.
Zland Communications, just ZLAND Communications Blogspot, and all the press releases are there. And there's a current one about the Space Force that I just announced. There's the one about the current we talked about earlier. These are all press releases. No one else in Canada does this. Grant Cameron does a great job with a lot of the different kinds of information with respect to UFO and what presidents know about UFOs and other kinds of exoconsciousness. People out west do sighting reports. People on the East Coast do other kinds of things with respect to Shag Harbor and all of that. I'm the only news agency in Canada, and as far as I know, in North America, that deals with this information on a press release basis, and I have a database of well over 1,300 news entities throughout the globe, from Russia, China, UK, France, Portugal, United States, and I just keep on pushing the information out as soon as these press releases go out. Now, with respect to the space program, I'd like to sort of quote some ideas, or at least some sentiments, from Richard Dolan. And if people aren't familiar with Richard Dolan, they should go to Keyhole Press. And there he has lots of information about documents, etc. And Richard was the first one to coin the phrase breakaway civilization. And what that meant was, and in knowing Richard in the way that I do, he lives in Rochester, New York, and
Right.
I know Richard quite well. He's a good friend of mine. He stayed at my house. We've been together at conferences.
Right.
Actually, he's coming up to the ACE conference in September. We'll talk more about that later. In any case, Richard has this theory, a well thought out theory about the breakaway civilization, meaning that there are entities within the United States government, and these are backroom situations, black budget operations, that have craft that can move with anti-gravitic or I'm not going to say faster than light propulsion, but definitely with anti-gravitic propulsion systems that can move very, very quickly. We're talking Mach 15, Mach 20. And his theory is that these craft have already reached out into space and gone to places that we would never expect them to go. And this is a group of people who've been doing this for years. And
these are manned spacecraft.
That's exactly. And so, it doesn't take a whole lot to think back to
like Starfleet.
Yeah, and even let's go back further to when jets were first, after World War II and the Korean War. And who would have thought that a jet airplane could ever function the way they did? We needed a propeller. No, now we've got jets. And then you move into this whole idea of lift, drag, and thrust, and those kinds of forces that an airplane will use. What Richard's theory is these craft the craft that they're using no longer depend on the thrust, lift, and drag physics of flight. We're looking at anti-gravitic technologies based on possibly zero-point energy, which we can talk about at another time, that allow these craft to move, hover, zip in and out at 12,000 miles an hour within our own atmosphere without creating a sonic boom. That's important.
Well, that's it. They're soundless. That's all the craft.
Well, the idea
behind... They don't make a sound.
They don't make a sound. But the idea behind that, Joyce, is that these craft somehow replicate the alien technologies, so enabling them to move through our own dense air without creating a sonic boom. So what they do is they electrify the edges of these craft, and they send out a signal to the molecules ahead of them to get out of the way so they can move more quickly without creating a sonic boom behind them. So once you move at, let's say, 700 miles an hour, any typical jet will break the sound barrier, and you'll hear that snap or a boom.
Like that,
These things are moving 11, 12, 13, 15,000 miles an hour in our own atmosphere with no sonic boom.
Right.
So this kind of propulsion system is just far beyond. You talk about Area 51 and what they were doing with the spy planes back in the 60s and 70s. This is a quantum leap above anything that happened back then. So that's another tentacle of this whole UFO ET issue that's yet to be explored and understood by the media and by the general public. So, when you just talk about UFOs, you're only saying one thing. This other kind of technology is replicative. It's replicating the extraterrestrial technologies that we found out about.
And the thing is, we are standing on the precipice of a new existence, completely. In our sciences and everything, and it's like we're back in 1919. You know what I mean?
I know
we made the quantum leap to 2019, and that journey to 2119 is going to be even faster.
That's right. Yeah, and what I think people need to realize is that this issue,
our children will see it.
Yeah, but the statement I make on my website, and it's some of the to have people understand where this is talked about, and the statement that I use is this issue has been spoken about, analyzed, investigated, and sequestered at the highest levels of governance on the planet. This is not just hearsay information. This is definite information that people have, and they need to know about it. We have a right to know about it.
We do, and I thank you, Victor Viggiani, for being so persistent and following all of this and bringing this to us. Like you said, you're the only one who's doing it, really, in that way.
That's right.
But thank you so much. And we're going to have you on again. And of course, if you want to listen to Victor, go to Zoomer Radio, why not? From 11 p.m. to 1 every Sunday night, Richard Surrett's show, and also go to his blog,
Z-Line Communication
blogspot. Yes, definitely. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. So much to think about.
It's a pleasure.
So much to do. Thank you very much. We'll be back next week with more of A Drink of Water here on CHHA 1610 AM.